All right, welcome everybody to the strap on your gun but don't ask for an abortion edition of Legal Tech Week. I am, as you can see, not in my usual office setting. I'm stuck midway between trying to get back to my office, so I've pulled over into a relatively quiet place from my car. We'll see how well this works for today. But this is Bob Ambrogi. I am the host of this show, and got a lot of good stuff to talk about today, I think, with several of our usual panelists here. So let's go around with our usual introductions. Victor, you want to kick it off?
Sure. My name is Victor Lee. I am Assistant Managing Editor for the ABA Journal covering business of law and technology. And yeah, it's been a really slow week. Absolutely nothing has happened at all in the legal sphere. I was just gonna take the whole week off. So,
Good thing you didn't. Zach.
Yeah, hey there. I'm Zach Warren, Editor-in-Chief of ALM's Legal Tech News. You'll also see me on law.com, American Lawyer, other brands. I actually know a colleague or two who did take this week off. Probably a poor decision in retrospect.
And Steve?
Steve Embry here. I write the blog Tech Blog Crossroads. I guess I could say I'm the editor-in-chief, publisher, author, janitor, dishwasher, you name it. And I also say that every opinion that appears on the blog are mine and mine alone.
But that means that all the money you make from that blog, you get to keep for yourself.
Right. Yeah, right. I can't even think of a catchy comeback for that one, Bob.
You're in it for love, not money. And Joe.
Yeah, Joe Patrice from Above the Law and the Thinking Like a Lawyer podcast. I know you're all saying that there was not much news this week, but there absolutely was, sincerely, because Above the Law announced its new A to Z Big Law rankings, a response to the Law 360 400, which is what the Law 760, I don't know. Yeah, and the NLJ 500. So everybody should check those out. I'll put those in the chat. But that's it.
And Jean.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Jean O'Grady. I write the Dewey B Strategic blog, and I also write a monthly column on Legal Tech Hub, and I cover legal information, knowledge, workflow, and technology.
Great. And interestingly, I happen to be parked in the park. I don't know if anybody can see the building at all. It's the JFK Library just outside of Boston, south of Boston. It's a beautiful setting looking out over. The trees weren't here. You can see Boston Harbor behind me. So I don't know, kind of maybe an ironic place to be on this day. As a matter of fact, the last time I was here was to see Justice Breyer speak a couple of years ago. So a very strange day in history. So we can be, I guess, glad we cover legal tech and not the Supreme Court, except of course Above the Law, which may occasionally have to cover the Supreme Court. Well, I'm going to kick it off today just because I think I have a very, very interesting story, which Zach tells me maybe I wasn't supposed to have. Maybe it was maybe the embargo was pushed to Monday. I don't know. I didn't get the memo. I went ahead and reported it. But this is a story of a legal tech company that has pivoted to effectively compete with the very law firms that used to be its customers. It's a company called Mighty, and they're, since what, I think it was 2015, 2014 or so, they've had a tech platform that is essentially an interface between PI law firms and lien holders in PI cases. And, those are the sort of the medical providers that, have claims against settlement proceeds in PI cases. And they've had this tech company going for a while, and according to the founder, he started to become discouraged because he said he kind of went into the area of legal tech wanting to help reduce the costs of legal tech of legal services to consumers. And he said that over the years, what he's seen is he's saved these PI law firms millions and millions of dollars, but that they haven't passed along any of that savings to their clients. And in fact, they're constantly looking for ways to inflate their fees or inflate the costs that they can charge their clients. And he got very discouraged by that. And so he decided that the only way to do anything about that was to take matters into his own hands and start essentially a PI firm that will aim to deliver legal services at lower costs for PI in PI cases, and that will commit to trying to push down costs more and more every year as they go forward. And what's interesting is they've kind of adopted this Atrium dual entity format that some of us may well remember, that the Justin Kahn Atrium thing that was going to revolutionize legal services and closed a few years later without revolutionizing anything. And so they've adopted a similar model here, where Mighty, the company, is going to be the kind of tech and services and marketing support. And they've formed a separate law firm called Mighty Law, which will, now I'm in a dual approach zone for Logan right now. So I don't know how this has happened. I've got planes coming every which way. So they've got the separate law firm, which the company doesn't have any ownership in the law firm. The law firm doesn't have any ownership in the company, but they have this sort of contractual relationship by which the law firm pledges that it won't charge more than a third for contingency fee cases, that it'll give back 10%. Good, Maureen, thanks. That it will give back 10% of all the costs to the clients. In other words, instead of billing the full cost of a case to the client, they'll just bill 90% of the cost to the client, and that they're pledging to continue to do more and more every year to push this down lower and lower. So it's a pretty remarkable story. I can't remember anything equivalent of a tech company pivoting to compete against its customers, and it's also, again, interesting in for being yet another attempt at this dual entity model. Besides Atrium, there had been ClearSpire before that that had tried it and also failed. So it will be. I guess they've formally launched today, and they've got the law firm up and going in three states, rather: Connecticut, Texas, Georgia, and they plan to see how it goes, and they plan to expand out into all 50 states eventually. And the funny thing is, they're also going to continue to provide their technology to law firms, to competing law firms, and they say that plan to continue to build out more and more innovative technology to help further drive down costs, and they'll make that technology available to competing law firms. And I said, well, you think they're going to want to buy it? And they said, well, look at firms like Litify or legal tech companies like Litify or I'm blanking on the other one. There's a couple out there that came right out of Direct Connections law firm. Litify was basically started out of Morgan and Morgan, and so who knows how this will develop? But a fascinating story. Zach, I know you knew a little bit about this, but I don't know how much you were able to pick up on.
Yeah, you hit on both the things that are most interesting to me. One being what you just talked about, the fact that they're still trying to sell their technology to other law firms that they are now competing against. Christine Schiffner is going to have something for National Law Journal and us on this on Monday, and she talked to an outside marketing consultant who basically said, yeah, I'm surprised they didn't rebrand, or they're trying to spin like off the law firm or make them different names or something like that, because I could see how a lot of PI firms are not going to take to this kindly, especially because in Mighty's marketing, they're pretty explicitly saying, like they said to you, we think that how law firms do it with their contingency models currently is kind of greedy. And by lowering it to capping it at 30% or whatever it is, they're trying to do things in a different way that I'm not sure PI firms are going to want to do that different way. And then, the other thing that interests me that you touched on is the Atrium model of it all. That was my first question to Christine, actually, is how the heck is this not unauthorized practice of law? But by separating them in that way, it'll be interesting to see whether somebody can finally get this to stick. Maybe go in plaintiff side and PI specific is the way to do it.
Yeah. I know nobody else really had a chance to see the story. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on it, but I mean, Steve, you were on the kind of the other side of that coin for a long time as a defense lawyer. Any thoughts on that?
Well, not really.
Oh, okay.
It is kind of interesting that somebody from the plaintiff's side of things is doing this. Their business model is so completely different from the defense side. I mean, one would think that plaintiffs' law firms, because of the way they do things on the contingency fee basis, would want to reduce costs as much as possible, right? Because every cost that's reduced is, and in a time sense, is more money made. Sort of just the opposite of a defense law firm, where you make more money by billing more hours and spending more time, you make more money by spending less time. But I guess what really has been transpiring is, they, instead of being satisfied with a 30% return, they want a 40% or 50% return. And, they're just basically using all the efficiencies to make more money. And, there's a lot of argument already that plaintiffs' law firms really make too much money, particularly in the class action context, where you've got, I get my little coupon for $1.98, and then I see the plaintiffs' law firms are paid $10 million. What? That doesn't make much sense to me. Right. So yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to see. That market is. You either play extremely local or you play really big nationally, like Morgan & Morgan and those kind of firms. They play really big nationally. They have offices all over. And they're an advertising machine, and they're quite effective at what they do. And that's a hard compete. On the local market,
like 600 or 700 lawyers at Morgan & Morgan. It's a huge firm.
Yeah, size matters, as they're fond of saying. Yeah. On the local side, you have to sort of be connected in the community a little bit more. So I don't know if they'll be successful at it or not. I did jumping in with that kind of competition, but it's an interesting concept.
Yeah, but they have a ready-made advertising campaign, right? It's like, hey, we worked with all these PI firms for a long time. We know how sleazy they are. So here we're going to do things differently. We're going to do things better for you. It's who can't really identify with that at the end of the day? Because by the end of the day, most people think that PI firms are like that, and it confirms everything that they think about PI lawyers and everything that's wrong with that industry. And so, it's interesting. It'll definitely, I'm interested to see where this goes. It'll be interesting to see, like, especially with like with a dual structure and everything, and also with the technology that they're going to try to sell back to firms. I mean, you figure if it's good enough technology, then firms will use it even if they're competing against them. So, and maybe they'll think they'll give them some kind of boost to compete against them. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes. I'm interested to see that.
Yeah, like Bob said too, though, the fact that it's a New York company, but the 3 states they're launching in, Connecticut, Georgia, and Texas. I don't know. I haven't read your story fully, Bob, and I don't think Christine got exactly why those 3 states, but I'm wondering if there's something inherent in the PI market there that they say, we're seeing that lawyers are maybe making too much money, or maybe this is where the customers that we're talking with are really clamoring for a change. But the fact that they hyper targeted that way is also interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I actually did ask that question, and I'm not sure I correctly remember. But my memory is that his answer, I don't think I put it in my story, but my memory is his answer was really had more to do with some business and lawyer connections they had in those states more than any other sort of strategic thing. But I mean, Connecticut seems like, Georgia and Texas are both big kind of PI lawyer states, and a lot of litigation, a lot of PI friendly lawyer litigation happens there in Connecticut. I think the guy lives in Connecticut for one thing.
Slip and fall out of your mansion or something. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, or while your chauffeur is driving you into New York. I know that's not all of Connecticut.
The one thing I do think that there's a small predecessor parallel in terms of Thomson Reuters having bought Pangea 3 years ago. They got rid of it, but I thought that was a situation in which they were selling to law firms and then simultaneously trying to undermine market share for law firms. But apparently, it didn't work out. They got out of the business.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. All right. I'm crippled by the fact that I don't have the spreadsheet in front of me. So I have no idea what you guys all picked. What's good? Gene, what do you have this week?
Well, this morning I posted this. Actually, this started months ago when Thomson Reuters had their whiplash event of canceling 24-hour support and then reinstating it in 2 days. But it made me...
Thanks to you.
Yes, it made me think about the state of customer support, because I've had a pretty long career, so my vision is a little bit distorted. But I remember when vendors used to pass themselves off as partners and seemed to be genuinely interested, like Thomson, or when it was Westlaw, referred to, its slogan was forever aligned with the practice of law, or something like that. Like they genuinely saw themselves as invested in lawyers' needs and helping lawyers practice. And to me, that pivot into saying, we don't, there's been a pandemic, nobody works in an office, there's no such thing as 24 hours as a 9-to-5 job, and yet we're going to shut down our customer support at night and on weekends. And it made me want to ask what other people thought was going on. So one of the important questions I asked was, compared to 10 years ago, how would you say customer support is? And over 60, well, first of all, I got an overwhelming response. I had 170 responses, which on my blog, and the whole time I've done surveys over the years, and this is definitely the highest response rate I've ever gotten. And the bad news is people took lots of time to provide me with detailed responses. So I have been working through the coding and trying to data normalize all the responses. But today I published something that was fairly clear a conclusion, which is that 60% of the people who responded said things were substantially or dramatically worse than 10 years ago in terms of customer support. And there were very consistent in the comments. The very consistent themes that arose were there's not enough support staff. The people who are supporting products don't understand the products. They don't understand the market. They don't know who the competition is. They can't explain why their product is better than the competition. They often give you the wrong information. They're hard to reach. It was a pretty bleak consensus that things are not good. Now, at the time, a number of my colleagues said, well, they're probably going to start to offer apps and bots and it's going to get better. But that we're not there yet. I mean, that may really be true down the line, but we're not there today. So I'll be reporting more as I work my way through the data analysis. I'll be posting more charts over the next month.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I mean, were there any silver linings in any of that? I mean, was there anything good that people were saying?
Well, what was interesting was the question about smaller companies having excellent service. There were some really interesting findings in that. Some of the small companies came out really well. And one in particular won in almost every category. And I'm not surprised, but I was surprised how consistent it was. I think I listed like 7 or 8 categories of support, like in documentation, responsiveness of staff, so I am working through my pivot table.
Are you naming names here in terms of the companies?
I'm not going to name them today, but when I do the one on the small companies, yes, I absolutely will talk about which small companies came out the best.
All right, we'll just have to wait in suspense.
Yeah, I was thinking as you were talking, Gene, I'm not sure it's limited to legal. I mean, sort of the decline in service across the board since the pandemic hit is just I don't have any survey data other than anecdotal data, but it seems bad. But, I guess a lot of it is there's not enough people to do the work. So that's a problem too, but at least reportedly.
But, what surprises me is for companies like, Thomson Reuters and Lexus, who have been in the market for literally decades, there was a time when they had people in their headquarters who could do a custom report and help an organization find out what was going on with their utilization, compare offices, compare practice groups, compare it to the overall market. They could do. Now it seems like they either don't support it or they don't care. Like when I ask my reps, I want a business review, they stare at me like, what's a business review? And why would I want to do one for you? Can you tell me how to write it? And it's like, why aren't people doing customer support? Why doesn't the organization have a template and say, when customers want to know about the performance of their contract, when they want to know something about the return on investment, you ought to be prepared to give them some kind of a report. And everyone seems totally surprised, at least in the larger organizations. It's very difficult for them. And I think part of it, sometimes I hate to blame the local reps on the ground. I really blame the headquarters ought to be giving people the tools, the software. There ought to be templates for all of this stuff. And I feel like when I ask for things, everybody has to invent it from scratch. And I'm like, you're a bazillion-dollar company. You've been in the industry for 30 years. Why are you surprised?
Well, I wonder if that's part of it. It's just particularly for those largest companies like your TRs, like your Lexus, whether they've just gotten too big and too much red tape and too much happening that nobody can really hone in on a specific problem because there's 30 different people who had input to that problem. And well, it's this person I need to talk to about this and XYZ. It seems to me, completely outside perspective, not having dealt with them, but just streamlining the process would go a very long way, just empowering people to give answers quicker.
Well, the other thing, by contrast, I mean, like when you think back to the early days of Lexus and Westlaw, almost out of the gate, they invented structures and capture mechanisms for passing on the costs to clients. They actually haven't improved those things in 30 years, but they're still there. But why did they do that? Because it helped them justify their costs by helping law firms pass the cost on. Those were mechanisms for driving their own revenue. Once it gets turned around and clients are pushing back, they don't want to pay for it. Our need to justify why we're spending money, because we don't have the kind of subsidy that used to be taken for granted 20 years ago. So why haven't they built an ROI mechanism? So I understand if you're gonna ratchet up you're gonna add on these new things and you're gonna raise the cost by 25 or 30%. Show me the ROI.
Is there any chance that part of the reason for this is just the overall explosion in legal tech, and it just gets harder and harder to find these people to work in these support jobs? I talked to a lawyer this week who told me he's been getting swarmed by headhunters for legal tech companies, for sales positions, for customer support positions, for marketing positions even. And he's never worked in tech, but he's a lawyer and they want his experience. They're looking for people with his kind of experience to come work in these kinds of jobs. And I wonder if they're just having a problem filling some of these positions.
Yes, but then all the more reason to create an infrastructure, a universal infrastructure that if you went from having 50 people to 10 people, create the infrastructure so those 10 people can do more, you can report on things more easily. I mean,
yeah. That would require tech.
So that's my rant for this week.
Yeah, all right. Oh, finally we get to find out what Josh Lennon's job actually is. That's good. I never knew what he did. He's got the best job in big tech.
He's a lawyer in residence? Where?
Clio.
Oh.
Yeah,
Hi, Josh. Never met you. Good to meet you.
You're probably the only two people on this call who haven't met each other or something. You haven't met Josh, or Josh hasn't met you. But, all right.
Long time listener, first time caller,
right? Right. Yeah. Oh, and Pam Smith is from Clio. So yeah. All right. Anyway, let's move on. I'm just going to go through the little squares on my phone here, and Victor, that would make you next. What do you got this week?
Yeah. So you know, I've been following the action on in Congress concerning the proposed online privacy bill, and it actually cleared a subcommittee. It cleared the subcommittee this week, and it'll presumably move on to the full committee next. And it seems like there's bipartisan support for it in the House, but obviously whether the Senate takes it up even before the midterms, is anybody's question. But there is hope, because the Senate actually did pass something this week, so it is possible for the Senate to do something when they want to. And online privacy is one of those issues that seems like they have pretty powerful advocates on both sides of the aisle. Republicans and Democrats, are something that they might have some common ground on. So it's interesting. And like the law, the law that was passed, it's some people say it doesn't go far enough, but as well as it's one of those things where it would require companies like Google and Facebook and companies like that to only collect personal data that is necessary to provide services, whatever that means. And that sensitive information, like personal information, social security numbers and stuff like that, would get more protection than what they get now. I mean, and obviously, whether that goes far enough is going to be an interesting question that will probably get taken up later on. But obviously they're against the clock. Probably nothing's going to get done if they don't do it before November, and then after that, it'll probably just have to get punted back to whatever the next Congress looks like. But I mean, it'll be interesting to see where it goes, and it could always be used as like a template for future bills down the line, and so we'll see what happens with that.
Yeah, we actually talked about that a little bit last week too. Was it last week? I think Zach, you talked about it last week. I think it's really interesting. One of the questions, if I recall right, that we talked about was this question of does the federal law in any way preempt state laws that are out there? Because there are an increasingly growing number of state laws on this issue, and they don't all necessarily align with each other. So there can be differences in state requirements along these lines, which could be a nightmare for businesses that do business across all 50 states.
Nightmare for businesses, a boon for lawyers.
And I think a nightmare for customers, because on the discussion last week, we got down, one of the issues that had been raised, I think by Zach, was the prospect of signing out to Amazon would be like signing up for a mortgage, like 42 pages of disclaimers where you had to check off what kind of privacy information you were allowing them to collect. And my alternative was, why don't I just have a profile someplace? And if a vendor wants to do business with me, they go and check my privacy profile. And that, which led to down this rabbit hole of, what was it, blockchain? Somebody wanted to do a blockchain project.
Yeah.
To Victor's point, though, especially if this is getting out of committee and it is starting to look more and more like this might not just be another fancy, this thing might actually have a chance of passing. I wonder if, say, you're a corporate legal department, when you're starting to prepare for this thing and really digging into the details, because I would imagine that it's one of those things that it's going to take a long time to try and implement. And it seems like the fact that they did create this out of whole cloth, it's not necessarily modeled off of Virginia or Colorado or California or one of these other bills, means that you're going to need to go through it with a fine-tooth comb to make sure you're complying with everything, which is going to take a while. So I think it'll be interesting to see what organizations say, okay, let's try and get the jump on this now, just because it will make our lives easier a little bit down the road if this thing does pass.
And I guess you would think that, like, if they, if they had done this for GDPR and for the California law and stuff like that, then they should have, like, at least the infrastructure in place to be able to quickly, implement something, or to be able to, kind of advise their clients as to, like, the potential of this bill and whatnot. At least one would hope. But then again, they might just be banking on the fact that that it might not get out of the Senate, and in which case then it's just academic.
All right. Anything else on that? Then next up in my screen is Steve.
I wasn't expecting to be next. Sorry. I have nothing to say on anything. No, I'm only kidding. Well, I'd actually picked up an article that Catherine Rubino for Above the Law wrote, keeping with the strategy that, I have nothing really important to say, so I piggyback on somebody else's. But it was a real interesting development of an AmLaw 100, barely AmLaw 100 law firm has decided that it's going to cut the salaries of associates whose utilization rate, which I assume is their billable hours, is 80% of their goal. And it just struck me as sort of mean-spirited, and a lack of the firm recognizing its responsibility. Two things have to be in play to do something like that. Either the firm does not have enough work to keep all the associates busy at 100% or more, or they've got a whole lot of lazy associates, which, people that go to work for AmLaw 100 firms and get jobs there typically are not terribly lazy. I mean, they have managed to excel in college and excel in law school and excel as law clerks, and some are associates, and it's hard to believe that they would be lazy enough not to bill their quota. In fact, probably the opposite is generally true. If there's enough work to do, these people by and large are highly competitive and highly motivated for the most part, and are gonna go out there and bill as much as they can, as fast as they can to advance in the law firm. And so I just I really sort of felt like that, or sort of surmised that perhaps there's not enough work to keep all these associates busy, or the work is not being divvied up in a way that is fair and appropriate, which is also a problem. I don't know, all the details, and apparently the law firm in question wasn't supplying many of the details to Catherine, which is no big surprise. But it just, it just struck me as not only bad on the associates, but sort of unfair to clients, because if it's the fact that the law firm doesn't have enough work to do and they're now going to cut your salary if you don't make 80% of your quota, then people are going to start looking for things to do, whether those things to do are really necessary, involve legal judgment or what. And at the end of the day, the person that gets hurt the most is not only the associates, but the clients. So I just had a real sort of visceral reaction to the whole thing, and it came kind of on the tail of an article I had written about the Krill Strategies and University of Minnesota study, came out earlier this month, which, to sort of state the obvious, that lawyers that are evaluated on their professional skill and those sorts of things are generally happier than those that are evaluated purely on their productivity and their hours, happier lawyers are healthy, and healthier lawyers in the long run are going to be more productive and be less costly, which is, duh. we really need a peer-reviewed study to know that, but obviously that's true. And this would sort of fly in the face of that. It's like, well, we don't really care about anything, but you better get your hours built up or we're going to cut your salary. So anyway, that was struck me as I was glad she wrote the story, but I was saddened by the fact that the law firm was taking that step.
So one interesting counter to that, because I talked to Catherine about this while we were all working on it. I think the way they postured it is we've had a series of raises over the course of this year, leading up to now. The Fed deciding we're going to have a big recession. So we've had all these raises. STIPTA's been a little bit behind on that. I think what they were trying to do clumsily was have cake and eat it too by saying we're matching the Cravath scale, but then saying, but not for a lot of you. So that way they can advertise to people if they're looking for laterals or trying to retain people, hey, we pay Cravath, but not really. That's my thought on what they were doing, and that I think you're still dead on right about your analysis that it means they're not making enough money. But I think it's that they were not making enough money to justify the salary bump. But rather than just stay the course, they couldn't do that and still compete out there with the talent war that's happening. So they were like, how about we do this? We say we've increased and just hope nobody notices. That was my read on it when I was hearing it, because when Catherine called them to get comment, they really did keep fixating on, but we're matching Cravath. I want everybody to get that headline. I was like, but no, right?
Yeah.
So,
but I think the word is disingenuous. Is that kind of?
it seemed a little clever to me. Maybe that's the right way I should say it. I found it clever.
That's a nicer way. It's a nicer way of saying it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they were trying to play a game.
Yeah. Well, and law firms do this a lot. I mean, you might have an associate who's working at 70% who really is kind of lazy and dogging it. So rather than walking into the associate's office and saying, okay, you've got 6 months to get your hours rate, and if you're not going to get your hours up, then you either have to go to another track compensation wise, or you need to go someplace else. But rather than do that, they said, everybody, this is going to apply to everybody. So this way we don't have to go have that unpleasant conversation.
No, some people might like it. I mean, if it means they get to work a little bit less, but they still make their what, $215,000 a year instead of $250. It's like, well, okay. I mean, you're not going to starve on that. So I mean, and if that means you get a little bit more of your weekend back, then why not?
Yeah, and that's a fair point, Victor. I mean, but if it's true that you have people that really want to make partner and they can't make their hours because there's not enough work or it's not being divided up appropriately, then that's bad, because here now you have people that don't want to go on that track and really want to be on the partner track. They just can't. There's just not enough work, or they're not getting enough work to get it done. And that happens a lot in law firms. They're very poor about, making sure that the work is divided equally, because, a partner with a big book of business wants associates A, B, and C working on his or her files, and they don't want anybody else working on them. And so, you might have associates D, E, and F who can't get any work. Yeah.
As we've talked about on the show before, there is some data to show that those people of color and women are often those who don't get as much of the work as the traditional, white male track people within a firm. So that's another consequence there. All right. I think, Joe, you would be up next.
Yeah. So let's see here. So my story, there are two takeaways, is more than a story, which is that, yeah, sorry. I'm dealing with a typing thing right there. So it sounded like terrible radio. Sorry, everybody. So yeah, so Onit released the second half of their ELR, their enterprise legal reputation, I think it is. Anyway, the ELR report. And this is an interesting study they've conducted, 4,500 respondents, enterprise and legal departments, getting at the heart of some things. Their first bit was very interesting. The second bit had a couple other things that I thought were interesting. One of which we've talked about on this show before, in the context of like Coca-Cola and Microsoft, obviously. The diversity in hiring of vendor programs that some of these companies and in particular legal departments have, those are applauded and mentioned in this report. Interestingly, while companies seem to be doing a very decent job of pushing vendor diversity, they're doing this far outpacing their own internal hiring diversity. One of the things it hits on is that there might be a bit of a NIMBY problem with the way in which these companies actually approach diversity, equality, and inclusion projects. So that's something to look out for, because I mean, the way I balanced it is, on the one hand, firms are where people learn. For better or worse, that's how we've structured our industry. So yeah, there's going to be more avenues to bring in diversity through hiring outside counsel than there necessarily are people who are prepared to move in-house. That said, it's not really diversity if a whole segment of jobs are not really accessible. And the second half, and I'll just introduce it and then we can talk about whatever. The second half of it was the first installment of the ELR focused on the fact that legal departments are like, we're beloved and trusted partners, and all of the enterprise stuff were saying, yeah, we're going to bypass legal on any deal, on the first deal we get a chance to, which is not good. So this report kind of got into a little bit of this. Yes, it seems as though legal departments are relatively clueless about how they're perceived, but it also seems a little more nuanced as getting this set of data. It seems as though everybody agrees and works with legal on certain categories of work, and then there's just other categories they think legal isn't necessary for, and that's what they bypass. So far from just not trusting legal, it's that they've decided there's certain enterprise folks have decided there are certain things that are low enough risk. I don't want to deal with how slow legal is. And the recommendation is, if legal were faster and more efficient, they would have a better pitch to say, yeah, this seemingly innocuous vendor deal still has to be something we look at.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I've heard that very thing from lawyers I've talked to in legal departments who basically say that the people in their sales side of things are just kind of afraid to bring deals to them for fear that it's going to just muck everything up and slow everything down, and so they do everything they can to just kind of avoid having to get legal involved. And I mean, that's what a lot of these products that are out there now are kind of really focused on that whole idea. Let's let the salespeople interface right out of Salesforce with whatever product and throw up some of these contracts in a more automated way and facilitate the review just to get the whole process through more quickly.
Yeah, I think it was interesting too. It was when I was talking with Brad Rogers at Onit, I think for the first one, the first report, but he made a similar point that legal operations is supposed to be the ones facilitating that sometimes and saying that, hey, we have this technology, lawyers can work efficiently, they can do what you want to do, they can be a sales driver for the organization because we have all of this here. But a lot of other business units don't necessarily realize either that legal ops is there or what capabilities the legal departments actually have. So there's just a little bit of a breakdown in communication, if nothing else, which makes all of this difficult for other organizations to really trust what the legal department can do.
I guess the other aspect of that is it comes back to haunt after the deal is closed. I mean, if you don't get legal involved when they should be involved, The salespeople might be happy because they met their quota, by the end of the month or whatever. But when there are then problems in the subsequent months with that deal, then it's left for somebody else to have to deal with the consequences of that. All right, well, Zach, I think you get last ups today.
Yeah, last but not least. So my story kind of goes back to the first thing we were talking about unauthorized practice of law and where technology companies are fitting in the modern legal landscape. Utah, Arizona have gotten a lot of press for Utah's regulatory sandbox, Arizona adjusting their rules around unauthorized practice of law. California has had committees for a regulatory sandbox, but this week basically said, even if we have one, it can't do anything. There was an amendment to their fee licensing bill, a yearly thing that happens, which I want to get the exact language here that we wrote about. The bill now says, any new bar-sponsored program must, quote, prioritize protecting individuals, especially those in need of legal assistance, from unscrupulous actors, including those actors seeking to do business in the legal field above all else. In layman's terms, basically saying that law firms and lawyers are the ones who are doing law. Any other outside businesses, no thank you. You are barred from trying anything here. So hypothetically, in February, they pared down their regulatory sandbox committee, but they still have it going. They also have another committee that's working on paraprofessionals, basically doing some sort of limited practice of law. But essentially what this bill that they passed on Tuesday says is, well, even if there is something that comes out of that, we're not going to let them either have the funding or practically do anything out of it. So to me, especially because we talked a lot about what state could be next and who's going to open up their regulatory laws, a lot of eyes went toward California. I think probably because of the nature of Silicon Valley, because a lot of tech and software is focused there. But there remains a whole lot of pushback from the California bar, it seems. And if you are looking for another state to go there, I don't think California is going to be the one that you're going to be looking at.
Yeah, I think it's part of what's interesting about that is, I mean, when this momentum towards some unauthorized practice of law rules, I mean, towards loosening those rules first started, all eyes were on California. And I think everybody kind of thought California was going to be the first state that was going to be the one that, flipped the dominoes and started this going all across the country. And nobody quite saw Utah coming out of left field to lead the way on this, and then Arizona. And California has turned out to just be a major sticking point. And I think, it's looking more and more like there's definitely going to be other states that are going to achieve reforms in this area well before California ever does. But it shows you that power of the this sort of entrenched interests of the organized bar and protecting their turf, and that's been a major obstacle to innovation in law for a long time, and it continues to be. And it's unfortunate, and it's just again, we've said this before, but in Utah and Arizona, it's been fascinating that the drive for change has come from the top, from the Supreme Courts in those states. To somewhat to the chagrin of the organized bar in some cases, and who knows? Maybe California Supreme Court will step up at some point too.
I'd actually written a tongue-in-cheek article that I posted yesterday about the Google engineer or former engineer, I guess, who proclaimed his AI program had human consciousness and feelings. Mainly because he did an interview of it, and the program recognized concepts of justice and injustice and sacrifice for the greater good. And so, I posed the question whether how many lawyers have a human conscience, and if the test is whether they perceive justice and injustice and are willing to self-sacrifice for the greater good, then I think a goodly percentage of them are out. I also wondered whether the AI program could pass the bar exam and get past the character and fitness committee and be hired by a big law firm like the one that would cut the poor associate salaries back to 8%.
That's fair. No, kind of to that point, though, I thought it was interesting that a lot of the bar's arguments in this case were explicitly, we're looking out for consumer protection. We're doing this for the good of people who are getting legal services in California, protecting them from these unscrupulous actors. When
that's always been the...
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And the argument from Utah, Justice Simonis and others has been pretty much kind of the exact same thing of we're looking out for consumers and because we're giving them more options. And it's you can't really be looking out for consumers both ways. There's got to be some push, give and take. And yeah, I'm a little bit skeptical that the only way to look out for consumers is by completely barring everybody else. But what do I know?
Yeah, well, the numbers belie that argument. That's the problem. You can't look at how many people are not getting legal representation and legal help in this country and say the existing rules are helping consumers. It's just a fact that they're not. So,
yeah, it's always the doomsday scenario that they cite, right? It's like the con man who weasels his way in to somehow passing himself or herself off as a lawyer and then taking all these poor innocent people for a ride and whatnot. But look, that's does it happen? Sure. But the alternative is that, okay, well, then these people are stuck with the status quo and they have they can't afford most lawyers, and most lawyers won't even do their work because it doesn't pay enough. And it's interesting because I remember when California first started looking at this, I remember I was surprised. I was like, oh, that's, I always thought it would be like when Utah and Arizona were doing it. I remember thinking, okay, well, maybe it has to be a small state like that, not a small state, but like a smaller state like that, because maybe if you get everybody on board and you get all the decision makers on board and whatnot, and you kind of maybe the bar isn't quite as diverse as a place like California, where you have a diversity of views and people who are adamant about protecting their turf and whatnot. And it's kind of like the whole kind of small firm versus big firm thing, where sometimes change happens more easily in a small firm as opposed to a big firm. And California is, obviously the big one in this case. And just the way that just following the story, the way that they kept cutting back on the mandate of these committees and whatnot, and kind of first kicking out people who weren't from California, and then limiting the scope of what they were going to cover and whatnot. I wasn't surprised to see that it went this way. California might have been a bridge too far for them. It might have been too big, with too many lawyers with different opinions, and maybe too competitive for some lawyers who are worried about losing what business they have. So maybe this is always going to happen. But yeah, but then it's kind of like, well, then what do you do for those people who need services in? The lawyers in California now aren't helping them. So how is this going to help them even more?
Yeah, I had a call this week with an AI engineer who is developing a product that would very sophisticated AI product for kind of answering consumer legal questions. Not to market yet. I thought we were meeting because he wanted to demo the product for me or something. Turns out he wanted legal advice on the question of whether his AI algorithm could be shut down by state authorities for unauthorized practice of law. And I said, I don't know, let me check with my bot. I have no idea. But my bot didn't know the answer to that one either. But it's sort of it gets to be an interesting question, right? As more and more AI is used to deal with legal issues, is there a point at which AI can be considered to be practicing law? I don't know.
There's an opinion from one state, I can't remember where. Basically, the reasoning is since only humans can practice law, if a program does it or an algorithm does it, by definition, it can't be the practice of law, which was kind of interesting reasoning.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean,
but what about the people who develop the algorithm or own the algorithm? Whatever.
Right.
but Bob, both Lexus and Westlaw have those, Q&A, where you can ask a question and it comes pretty close to giving you a legal answer. And
Yeah.
I haven't heard of anybody attacking those systems as unauthorized. I mean, I think if it were going to happen, that might be they might be a logical target.
Yeah, let's shut down Thomson Reuters over unauthorized practice of law.
As we were saying earlier.
Well, they don't
Which is
have
not
any customer service anyway, so why not?
which I'd just like to remind everybody is not a statement endorsed by Above the Law or any of its subsidiaries.
No, I mean, Gene is going to shut them down long before that happens.
No, I think I as other people have mentioned greed before, I actually think at one point they're just going to kill the golden goose and some little competitor is going to come out and I don't know, it's going to change the landscape.
All right. That may happen next week. And if it does, we will talk about it here. But I think that does. Anything else anybody want to bring up before we wrap up today?
See, Bob, I think you should host all episodes from your car. I think it's a good look.
Yeah,
it's a nice touch.
It's geeks in cars.
Yeah, comedians in cars. Right? We can just be legal tech people in cars.
Yeah. We can take turns.
Yeah, my Hyundai not as cool as yours, I have to say.
Yeah, my Subaru doesn't quite have that same look. I gotta say.
Yeah, this is an old car. This is like my pandemic indulgence. I wanted a convertible and I hadn't had one for a long time, so I just thought it'd be fun. But if we do this, then Joe can't drink on Friday, so that's not going to work out. Joe can't.
I
can't
couldn't
drink and
today.
drive.
I couldn't today anyway because I've gotta go driving after this. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So we can arrange that.
Yeah.
We'll just get the bus. Get the Legal Tech Week bus.
The party bus.
Yeah.
Ilta ideas.
There we go.
All right. Double L
right.
before that. I know Gene will be there. And I know I will be there.
I'll be there.
And CleoCon.
Yeah, and CleoCon.
Oh, wait, that's
a
ways off still.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's good because gas prices are high. It'll take us a while to get all the way out to where is CleoCon? Nashville, not San Diego.
Nashville.
Yeah. All right. Well, good. We'll see everybody next week, and thanks for putting up with my remote moderating.
Wow.
Good.
So,
yeah.
I